Good morning and welcome to Rising. Thanks so much for tuning in. We've got a great show for you today. I believe we do, as always. Hello, Lindsay.
How you doing? I feel like we had a nice streak for this first week back of the year.
A lot of news stories.
No matter what craziness that happens in our country, we still have a peaceful vibe in this office.
It was, of course. It was a little bit of a slower news day yesterday, perhaps our first slower news day of the year, despite everything that's going on.
Well, I think when you hit the weekend with Venezuela and you come into Monday with all this breaking news, it's kind of hard to keep up that pace.
It's hard to keep up with everything going on.
Tons of stuff. Coming up on Rising, the White House sparked outrage after uploading a January 6th Capitol riot webpage. I'll be discussing that in my lens.
Plus, President Trump announced that Venezuela would be turning over between 30 and 50 million barrels of oil to the U.S.
And during an appearance on The View, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett,
my favorite.
I was just going to say that.
My girl.
Threw some shade at Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, but Crockett also said that she should be shown some grace. Look at that balance. But first, Robby, what is on your radar?
Meet New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani's new tenant advocate, Sia Weaver. Now, Weaver's job, supposedly, is to advocate for the tenants' rights, make sure they aren't being mistreated by their landlords. But because Mamdani is a democratic socialist, his appointee is not some normal person who just wants to make sure that people aren't getting ripped off. No, Weaver is a radical opponent of the concept of private property, who has implicitly advocated the collectivization of property. In other words, the state comes in and takes your property, particularly, it seems, if you're a white person. Here's what she said in a video from several years back, well before she was picked for this job.
I think the reality is that for centuries, we've really treated property as an individualized good and not a collective good. And we are going to transitioning to treating it as a collective good and towards a model of shared equity will require that we think about it differently. And it will mean that families, especially white families, but some POC families who are homeowners as well, are going to have a different relationship to property than the one that we currently have.
Yikes, a different relationship with property, their own property. My friend Brianna Wu reacts on X saying, I spent a decade working in progressive politics. They all talk like this behind the scenes. Eventually, I came to the conclusion that they were morally unfit to hold any power whatsoever. That is the sad truth. But Weaver's radical far-left agenda is perfectly welcome in the Mamdani administration. Just a few days ago, during a swearing-in ceremony, Mamdani promised to replace rugged individualism with the warmth of collectivism. Remember that?
We will draw this city closer together. We will replace the frigidity of rugged individualism with the warmth of collectivism. If our campaign demonstrated that the people of New York yearn for solidarity, then let this government foster it. Because no matter what you eat, how you pray, or where you come from, the words that most define us are the two we all share: New Yorkers.
The warmth of collectivism hasn't worked out in North Korea or the Soviet Union. It didn't work out in Venezuela. Maybe it'll work for us. We already know the answer, of course, even if New Yorkers who voted for this do not. Take the housing issue, for example. Mamdani and Weaver think the tenants are best served by heavy-handed government regulation when we know the opposite is true. Mamdani recently toured a rental property that was in a deplorable state, trying to make the point that this squalor is what landlords subject tenants to. But of course, the reason the landlord won't pay to fix the building is that it's rent-controlled. They wouldn't be able to charge more for a nicer property, so they don't bother. Mamdani, of course, vigorously supports rent control, even though it leads to rental shortages and other problems just like that one. As the Washington Post writes, Mamdani, Weaver, and their fellow travelers might enjoy fantasizing about a collective utopia without property rights. In reality, renters are going to be left fending for themselves as they navigate ever-dilapidating housing conditions. Yes, indeed. So we're seizing people's property now, I guess, as a result of tenants' rights.
Okay, so
we're just going to nationalize all the property. We'll centralize it under the Commissar, Chairman Mamdani, and Sia Weaver. White people especially for some reason, but she said some people of color too. I guess that was when we were still using that terminology. That's like a 2018, 2020
I don't like
sort
to
of
change all the
woke
terms every time.
excessiveness thing. I don't want that person in power at all, but here we are.
Well, I think Mamdani made his choices for different positions, and we're going to have to accept them in the same way
Based
that
on
we
who was the most
have
radically left
accepted Trump's choices of random people that he's picked to lead positions they have no experience in. But either way,
No, she has experience. I'm not saying she doesn't have experience.
No, there's several people I'm saying that we might
Yeah.
disagree with the choices, but
Too
I
much
don't mind the
experience.
choice. He can do whatever he wants. I think that what's first needs to be said is what's overstated, historically inaccurate. I've watched a lot of her speeches in the past, and she talks about the fact that we need to perhaps maybe have like inherently racist idea of owning property. I don't think that that is correct.
Right.
I think that when you understand history and you understand how the freed slaves were promised property, never given that, when you understand the Homestead Act and you understand redlining and redistricting that caused people to not have the access to certain properties, when you talk about home loans that weren't given to people of color intentionally, historically, before there were laws passed against things like that. These are all things that go into the fact that people didn't have the opportunity to have this perceived wealth across the
laws
country.
preventing black people from being allowed to own property are not examples of state, or not examples of cap. That's wrong. That's the government managing
that's
the
what I'm
economy.
saying. We as a country have grown from the place of freed slavery until right now. And so a lot of people discuss the idea of how do we atone the 40 acres and a mule idea? How do you make people of color whole when they did a lot of the work on the lands and reap no benefits or no profit? And the largest driver of wealth is owning land in this country for many people. And so people have been struggling with how to rectify that for generations. But I don't think the answer is seizing land that already exists now. But she's talking about a lot of gentrification and how a lot of people of color also end up on the short end of the stick of that in those situations. So I think she and Mamdani, again, like he hired a lot of people across the board, have to come together to figure out how to reach the goal of making it, hopefully her goal is to make it more equal for people that are less fortunate or just people of color that have no access to home ownership after all these generations of being held back, and to level the playing field. But that doesn't look like taking it away from somebody.
They
that
always
already
level
owns a
the
home.
playing field by not, but do you know what I'm saying? The people
I don't think that
steal from the people at the top to bring it down.
I don't think the word steal. The word steal doesn't work, because if you talk about historically, like why 4 generations might own a property and somebody worked on it for free, but it was never given any rights to the property or any profit from the property, then you could see how that would set the black person's generations behind the person that owned the property that they worked on after slavery. Like, you get all of that. I know that you understand that historically, but we're not talking about that. We're here in 2025, and we're talking about how to move forward, and that doesn't look like seizing the land from the person that now owns it, but it does look like creating opportunities for people of color to own more property. And I think that that's a noble idea to push forward, but she's going to have to figure out a better strategy than taking it away.
She wanted to take it from
she said, and also
black people too.
She said people of color. That could be everybody, Latino people, Asian people. She said the whole POC. That
you owned a property in Colorado.
I still do in Colorado.
She's coming for you. She's coming for you.
But I do think that she and Mamdani, I appreciate that Mamdani within his first week has instituted some executive orders to try to hold accountable some of these slumlords that own major properties that aren't doing the work. You still cannot leave people with things like no heat or fixing items in their home.
Why they're not going to fix it? Because
no, they still should have a bare minimum. People are living in crappy conditions because people want to be cheap because it's rent control. You have a responsibility to make sure that the tenant isn't freezing in the winter, right?
I would get rid of
we
the
can
rent
say that.
control, and then they would.
Well,
fix
some of the
stuff.
companies, one of the biggest companies is filing bankruptcy right now to avoid all of the litigation that's coming down their way. And Mamdani's like, not so fast. You're about to make these people whole, then you could go bankrupt. No. And so I think that that's honorable.
I think we are not ignoring, but underplaying the radical extent of Mamdani's agenda and just how dangerous and psychotic his
President Trump likes him, so I guess we'll just see how that fares over time.
That's not, in my book, quite an endorsement. But coming up next, more updates in the aftermath of Nicolas Maduro's capture by American forces. We'll be right back.